Good evening. I'd like to call tonight's regular meeting of council to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of April 11th, 2016 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Hanhawa, seconded by Councillor Kinney. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the public engagement meeting of March 14th, 2016 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Moreau, second by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of March 21st, 2016 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kinney, second by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 3C, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of March 21st, 2016 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, second by Councillor Niche. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. And item 3D, recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of March 21st, 2016 be received. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, moving on. We have a petition and delegation today from AltaGas, Mr. David Markham and Ms. Jennifer Osmar. Please come forward. And you can use that microphone and just press the green button there. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council. We absolutely appreciate the time on the agenda today to be able to present to you about our company, AltaGas, and about the propane export terminal that we proposed for Ridley Island. So we have a brief presentation that we prepared, and we'd like to run through it, and
Great.
of course entertain your questions at your discretion. So just go to the next, maybe push the arrows.
Just there?
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Manual.
So why don't we just go to the next slide. I guess for an introduction to AltaGas, don't let the name of the company deceive you. We're actually a lot more than a gas company from Alberta. We're actually a diversified energy infrastructure company. We don't extract or explore for gas, but companies that do often send their gas to us. We process and we transport gas. We also do other forms of power generation, including the Bear Mountain wind farm just outside of Dawson Creek. And we've recently completed 3 run-of-river hydroelectric projects just to the north of here in British Columbia that we're very proud of. We're also the parent company of any number of gas distributors to household, including we're the parent company of Pacific Northern Gas. So our company stands at about 1,700 employees, and our asset base is upwards of $10 billion. Again, don't let the name AltaGas fool you. We have a lot of investments in BC. I mentioned the run-of-river hydroelectric projects, the Bear Mountain wind farm, and of course we'd very much like the centerpiece of our work in BC to be the propane export facility that we've proposed for your area here, and we wanted to come to talk to you about that.
Central to the success that AltaGas has had in communities like Dawson Creek, where we built the wind park, where we built the run-of-river projects with the Tahltan First Nation, community engagement is paramount for AltaGas. We are committed to community and First Nations engagement. We're committed to early dialogue, such as being here today, to having a communication with the community throughout the environmental review process and throughout the life cycle of the project. And our purpose here today is really about getting to know the community of Prince Rupert and to invite Prince Rupert to get to know AltaGas, to understand who the stakeholders are, what your concerns are, what your values are, and as a company to provide you with open and accountable communication throughout the process. So what we thought we would do is just have a brief description of propane, propane in everyday life. It's a familiar fuel here in Canada. Most of us have a tank of it in our backyard barbecues. What's perhaps not as familiar is that propane is used around the world heavily for domestic use, such as cooking and cleaning and drying clothing, and for powering equipment, generating power. So there is quite a bit of demand globally for propane. And propane is also meeting a need to help provide a cleaner burning fuel. LPG, as it's also known, emits about 20% less CO2 than heating oil and 50% less than coal. So why export propane? AltaGas believes that Canada can be part of the global propane market, and AltaGas wants to be part of the solution for Western Canadian gas producers. Currently, there is an oversupply of propane in Western Canada. Traditionally, our trading partner has been the United States, and they've become self-sufficient. And so our producers are looking to find exports in Asia. And AltaGas would like to be that solution. And we believe that Prince Rupert and the site located at Ridley Island is an important part of that solution. The process for exporting propane is relatively simple and straightforward. Here we have a little diagram describing what the facility consists of. And first and foremost, the facility would receive propane from British Columbia and Alberta via the existing CN rail line. Once it arrives at site, the propane would be transferred to intermediate pressurized storage bullets. At that point, the propane is cooled to minus 42 degrees Celsius, and it is stored and cooled at atmospheric pressure. Once cooled, the propane is transferred to very large gas carriers using the existing RTI coal jetty. And at that point, the propane will be exported to Asia and other markets.
So why locate at Ridley Island? I think you've probably heard a lot from LNG proponents about your strategic location here at Prince Rupert and the fact that shipments from here often take a lot less time to get to Asian markets. So that's definitely one huge strength of your location here and why we're attracted to this part of the world for our facility. But also the location and the site at Ridley Island, it's a previously developed site. I believe there's currently a sulfur processing and shipment site on the location that we're considering. So it's a site that there has been a lot of industrial development. It is adjacent to an existing CN rail line, and it's a fantastic location, an established location for these type of overseas shipments. So we're very excited about our proposed location. And there is a outline of the location at the southern tip of Ridley Island. I'd just like to note that we would be utilizing the existing jetty, so we would not need to be constructing a new marine infrastructure for our project. We would be using infrastructure that's already there, plus the site, as you can see, has already been pre-cleared. We wouldn't be clearing any additional trees. We wouldn't require additional space. This is a bit of a layout as to what the facility would look like should it go forward with, of course, the rail cars. Those cylindrical tubes are the bullets that Jennifer spoke of earlier, and a big storage tank to store the propane once it's been through the process. Finally, I'd just like to say we also operate a similar facility just across the Canada-U.S. border in Ferndale, Washington, and we'd like to extend, if you have an interest in looking at what a typical facility like this looks like, we'd definitely like to extend an invitation for you to tour our facility and take a look at it for yourself. But this would be a first of its kind propane shipping facility here in Canada, so we're very excited about the possibility of being pioneers in that regard. We see a lot of benefits. We're looking at a capital investment. We're looking at about what we estimate to be between 200 to 250 construction jobs and about 50 jobs once the facility is completed. So we're not talking about something that's as big as one of the LNG facilities. It's much smaller than that. But still, we think that the creation of 50 permanent jobs at the end of the day is a good thing for the community. We also think that it's a great opportunity to start to diversify the products being shipped out of Ridley Island. What we're looking to do is to not add to existing traffic of vessel shipments going in and out of Ridley Island. We do see the downturn in the coal economy. We do see an opportunity to possibly replace some of that traffic with some propane shipping traffic as a result of our facility. So we're about to get going through our regulatory process. We're still in discussions. The process will be handled by Ridley Terminals Inc. Section 67 of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act indicates that any projects that are taking place on federal land must go forward through an environmental review. And since we're proposing to sublease some of Ridley Terminals' land, it will be Ridley Terminals that will be undertaking this environmental review. So we're awaiting the final details of that review as we speak, but we do anticipate being able to go forward with the review in the very near future. And that would include significant public engagement, including open houses and a public comment period, much the same as a lot of the LNG projects have had to go through. And we look forward to engaging with your community and going through that process in the very near future. And with that, we'd invite any questions that you might have about our facility.
Councillor Niche.
Just when you said
Microphone, Councillor Niche.
40 to 50 jobs, is that direct jobs, or is that are you including, say, a tugboat helping to bring in a ship, or is that for the actual site itself, direct?
The actual site itself.
Okay.
Not including any of the indirect jobs that might accrue as a result of the facility as well.
Okay.
Councillor Kitty.
Thank you for your presentation and welcome to Prince Rupert. What are the dangers of shipping this?
I think it's clear that we're going to see an increase in the volume of rail traffic that is going to be bringing the propane to the facility. We're looking at roughly 50 cars per day, so I think that's an obvious risk. And we're fully aware of the level of public concern out there with the prospect of shipping dangerous goods such as propane into the community. I do want to make clear, though, that the design of the rail cars that will be shipping the propane are very tightly regulated by Transport Canada. And with respect to the recent Lac Mégantic tragedy, we've seen a real tightening of the rules by Transport Canada with respect to this. Furthermore, CN will not allow us to ship propane to Prince Rupert or anywhere else unless we are using one of these rail cars that meets the specific Transport Canada standards. And I'd also like to remind your worship and members of council, I believe that Prince Rupert is already receiving shipments of propane that are being shipped by CN along the existing CN line and going up to Alaska, albeit in this particular case we're going to definitely be seeing a step change in that if our project goes forward.
Thank you.
If I could just add, I appreciate your question. It's a very relevant question. I'd like to add also that AltaGas is an experienced operator in propane with respect to the existing propane terminal down in Ferndale, Washington. That facility has been in operation for over 40 years without incident. AltaGas has been the operator of that facility since 2014. And so we bring to this project a set of experience and a core value of safety at AltaGas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Cunningham and then Councillor Randhawa.
Couple of questions. What's your time frame?
Thank you for the question. We are, as David said, we are just anticipating to begin our environmental review process in the coming weeks. We expect that under Section 67 of SIA that we will be engaging in environmental review for a good portion of this calendar year with the community. The intent, AltaGas's hope is that we will be able to come to a final investment decision by the end of this calendar year. And if that's positive, then we look to construction in 2017, and we hope to be sending shipments in 2018.
What's your total cost of the project?
We're looking at a capital investment between 400 and 500 million.
Okay. Now, I'm assuming you have a good safety record. You say you do, but what's the record for transportation? You know, like derailment, things like this with propane. You know, once it gets to the terminal, it's relatively safe, but it's the transportation from the field to the terminal that it was a main concern for a lot of people in the north, because these propane tanks are going to be going through populated towns like Terrace and that, right through downtown. The other thing is, with the recent accidents in CN and that, the standards of propane tanks and oil tanker cars have changed in the last few years. Are you going to be using old existing propane cars or new built ones, just built specifically for this project?
We will be using propane cars that comply with the new Transport Canada regulation around the transportation of dangerous goods, including propane. So that's something that we're acutely aware of, that all up and down the CN rail corridor that this is likely to be a concern. We're engaging with CN in hopes of making sure and making so that people along the rail corridor have confidence in what we're doing and are well informed of the safety standards that are in place.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You said like in construction time there will be 200 to 250 jobs. So what's your plan? You usually bring your own people for construction time, or you hire local people too?
Our commitment is to hire locally first. Again, that's been a measure of success in the other communities that we have built our projects in, and we understand that that's important to be able to build relationship with community, and it's what AltaGas believes in is hiring locally and providing jobs for locals. It's about helping to create a sustainable community, and we believe that.
Councillor Thurkelson.
I guess I'm back to safety. What happens if there's a derailment? What is the worst case scenario?
Appreciate your question. Extremely relevant question. We are committed to working with CN, and they have committed to work with us to partner to be able to accurately answer a relevant question like yours. CN has been operating and transporting propane across its entire network successfully for many, many years. And it abides by the regulations of Transport Canada. Any specifics as to your question with respect to derailment, I would have to defer at this time to more expertise within CN, and I would be more than happy to come back and either with CN or put you in touch with CN so that we can get you the specific answers to your question.
I would assume you'd be able to answer questions on toxicity. CN is going to answer questions, I imagine, on transportation, and I imagine that you're going to be well prepared since you're going to be talking to all the communities you're going through the middle of. But I'm concerned about toxicity and spills into the Bulkley and Skeena rivers and into the Fraser watershed. So I'm wondering about the toxicity and what cleanup provisions there are.
Propane as a fuel is non-toxic. In the event of a spill or a leak, Propane will dissolve into the air. It will not contaminate the soil or the water.
Thank you, and I have a question. If there is a leak at the farm, what kind of fire services are you going to be supplying to ensure that any leak at the farm is going to be contained?
And by the farm, do you mean the facility?
I mean the terminal, yeah.
Thank you for your question. Our project team is currently undertaking a QRA, a quantitative risk assessment, and we have committed to engaging in an emergency response plan for the land, for the facility itself. And so as we are early in the process, we look forward to the results of those key studies and being able to communicate the results of those studies back to the community.
I should indicate, however, that the tank that is going to be storing the propane at the site will be double walled. So that's an extra precaution that we do plan to take with this particular facility. Plus, we will be employing a state-of-the-art leak detection system as part of our plant facility, so that we do everything we can at the front end to minimize the risk of any leaks occurring at this particular location.
Yes, because I'm wondering about the any extra training our fire department might need, and any extra equipment they might need, and certainly I don't think taxpayers of Prince Rupert want to be paying for that, any extra equipment or training. So the final question I have is on housing, and what you plan to do, commit to our community regarding housing, permanent housing. I'm not talking about for construction workers. I'm talking about housing for people who are coming into Prince Rupert. As you must know, our housing situation is very tight, and so any, as far as I can see, any proponent who comes in Prince Rupert should be looking at the socioeconomic impacts of their project on Prince Rupert, and part of that is housing. And so are you proposing to commit to developing any kind of affordable housing in Prince Rupert, or can we see a financial contribution? Have you thought about that?
I think you've just put it front and center before us to consider. I think that we're obviously aware that we do want to be part of the community should our facility go forward for at least the next 25 years. And we do know that the current housing in the community is definitely under stress. So I think we'd appreciate the opportunity to continue dialogue with yourselves around how we can make the most meaningful type of contribution towards the local housing situation. I do want to note that we do not plan to exacerbate problems already in the community with housing. We are going to be looking at establishing a temporary camp for our own employees and workers once construction begins.
Your Worship, I have one final question. And do you flare?
There is a flare, but it will only be for emergency purposes and during startup. It will not be flared on a regular basis.
And one other point, the flare is not, it's ground level and it's enclosed.
Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, during your construction phase, are you going to have a camp for your workers?
That is the plan at this point in time, yes.
Okay, and your power, is it going to be self-generated or use the hydro grid, or?
I believe we're intending to use about 15 megawatts off of the hydro grid, yes.
Okay, and getting back to Joy's comment there, in your existing communities where you are now producing or shipping propane, what amenities do you have already provided for those communities, if any?
That's a great question.
You know, you're saying that you're going to look at different things. I know you already have an existing plant. I just wonder what you've done in the existing community that would be any different than what you're doing here? It's, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't have the specifics. I apologize. I don't have the specifics on what we've done in those and unique communities. And I can learn more about that, and we can use that perhaps as part of our dialogue going forward. I'm happy to look into that.
Okay, thank you.
I think what both the councillors are saying is that we've done a considerable amount of work on a new initiative called Planning for Major Projects, where we've identified a whole bunch of community indicators and needs that we have in the community. And any project basically of this size or above is something we classify as a major project. So one of the things we're looking to do policy-wise is see if we can work with proponents to invest in some key pressure points in the community and help us develop that sustainable community, not just economically, but social speaking as well, that we have some low-income residents here. We have those types of issues, housing shortages. We have a need for affordable housing. And so having you a part of that conversation, if this is the first exposure, clearly, but we have a whole variety of baseline data that we can share with you that might help your company's planning processes. And it's something definitely we would like to engage with you on, for sure.
We appreciate that, and just to reiterate that historically AltaGas has made contributions to the communities, and once it learns and understands what the needs are, and so accept that as our position as we come into the community, and we welcome that information.
Other questions from council? I do have one question actually. Have you guys identified where the gas supply or the propane supply is coming from at this juncture?
It will likely be coming from northeastern British Columbia and northwestern Alberta.
Okay. So my understanding is that, so it's not your gas supply?
No, it'll be gas producers who extract and send it to us. We will add value by processing it and then railing it out to Prince Rupert area for shipment to foreign markets.
Okay.
AltaGas currently owns 6 large natural gas processing facilities in Alberta and British Columbia, including the younger facility in Northeast BC.
Okay.
And we will be sourcing some of the propane from there.
So have you identified which companies then that you'll be doing those arrangements with, or?
Not in full detail yet. Those are conversations that our commercial folks are having currently.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, I think that's all for us. Thank you for your time today, and we'll be discussing further. Absolutely.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Much
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Great.
you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to bylaws. 9A. So we have our fire chief here tonight if there's any questions from council. However, we have a new amendment bylaw number 3387, and the recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to the proposed bylaw cited as Fire Control and Protection Amendment Bylaw number 3387, 2016. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Is there any discussion and questions on this? Councillor Thorkelson.
Yeah, I sort of wanted some kind of a report rather than this quite short report. Does this mean that we have given up the idea of a volunteer fire department? Or is this a volunteer assisted fire department, I should say? And these are minimum standards of training. Is it going to increase our costs? It's not that I disagree with minimum standards of training for firefighters, but I want to know what the difference is, why we were passing this, the difference between what will happen before we've passed it and what happens after we passed it.
Ms. Long?
Yes, Council. This is basically an initiative of the provincial government. I think generally called downloading. This is an attempt on the part of those people in that ministry to establish standards for us, which we are now required to meet, and we are now changing the bylaws to reflect that policy initiative on the part of the province. They've worked with the Fire Chiefs Association, etc. This all kind of stems from some very unfortunate circumstances where it was apparent in hindsight that the training was not adequate for the circumstances that resulted in some very unfortunate circumstances. And I think a number of years later, we're now having to react to what the province believes is minimum standards. Now, here in City Prince Rupert, that's not really an issue for us. Hasn't been an issue for us for many years. We're not sort of close to those minimum standards and never have been. But these are issues which, as far as the province is concerned, is the whole province is flat on a piece of paper, so everybody has to follow those same kind of regulatory regime, and that's basically what this is.
Councillor Van Halen.
So, like basically, it will cost us extra money or simple?
No, there's no. As a full-time fire department, we've been meeting these standards for many years. We're a really high-quality service provider, have been for 20s of years. But this is a requirement on the part of some other departments in much smaller communities to have to meet a minimum standard in accordance with some of the standards that are out there. And this is now becoming mandatory as a result. And as a result of that, we're changing our bylaws to reflect the requirements of the province.
Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, question I've got is the AHJ, or authority having jurisdiction, is that the city or the fire department?
That's the city. It's the council.
Okay, and on page 3 it says this document and program does not cover the minimum standards for training and skills necessary to perform other advanced or special functions. And as we are now getting, and Dave would probably agree with me, we're now getting into more and more advanced training and more incident command situations and things like this. Are our firefighters going to have to take some more of this advanced training?
Well, these requirements are about the minimum standards, not the maximum standards.
It says here it does not cover the minimum standards, so who's going to set the standard, minimum or maximum?
Go ahead, Dave.
You're not going to sit there all by yourself. I was ready to move.
Good evening. So the basis of this is it is the minimum standard, and this is only for firefighting, not for LNG or natural gas or those. This is just strictly for firefighting, structural or commercial firefighting itself, not the specialties, not the rope rescue or high angle stuff that we do.
Okay, that's what I was getting at, because I know our firefighters, they're good at what they do, but we're getting into more and more specialty rescues and things like this, and if we do have LNG or propane or that, we're getting into confined space entry and rescue and stuff like that, and it's a higher degree of training than we normally have. And I've seen it at the Coast Guard, and you've seen it too, and we do not have the facilities or the training for these type of things, and they would be very specialized, and it'd be nice to have, but we don't have them yet.
Other questions? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Report from the Director of Operations regarding the road closure and removal of road dedication bylaw number 3388, 2016. Welcome, Mr. Pushy.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the road closure that we're talking about is on Chamberlain Avenue. Chamberlain Avenue is undeveloped, and it is runs parallel to the Highway 16. The road closure is basically to be able to raise title to the property in order to lease the land. So what we're looking for is a first, second, and third readings towards the closure of this portion of Chamberlain in order to lease the land. The property will be leased at market rate. It will not be consolidated, so future it can be brought back into a road right-of-way, and then that road can be developed in the future. It will not be sold, and we will not allow any permanent structures to be erected on that right-of-way.
Any questions from council? Okay, so the motion is that council give first, second, third readings towards the closure of a portion of Chamberlain Avenue regard to the provision to bear land lease between Quickload and the City of Prince Rupert. Moved by Councillor Renhawa, second by Councillor Niche. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Next report, road closure and removal dedication bylaw for Park Avenue and Five Corners.
Thank you. This one is for second and third readings of the road closure and removal of road dedication. We have seen this a couple months ago come through. There was some opposition from some of the neighborhood. So council's resolution is for property sale. We would be selling it at appraised value. Development permit would be required for all associated works that may happen on that site. And we would look for the property to be consolidated into the into the parent lot. Sorry, so we are recommending that council give second and third readings for the road closure and removal of road dedication by law number 3371.
Moved by Councillor Kinney, second by Councillor Niche. Discussion.
I understand that there's no in most of our sale of property. We've asked for a timeline for development, and I understand there is no timeline to attach a sale of this property. Is that correct?
Mr. Mandrick, with the purchase and sale or potential purchase and sale agreement, was there a reverter clause in this one?
Councillor Niche.
When we discussed this, the idea was that he was to have to combine it to his property right away, making it one parcel of land, so we can't really have a reverter clause on something that's a combined piece of property now. And the reason why we wanted it combined right away so that it would generate the tax on a piece of land that was one big piece of land versus a bunch of residential lots, which a lot of it is right now. So that was what I recall of the situation.
Your Worship, we've done quite a bit. The city has done quite a bit on to enable the development of that Five Corner property. We've over the years we've done many things, and what I'm concerned about is that we keep doing things and we don't see that property developed. And I'm concerned that's just sitting as we were promised a shopping center there. We were promised all kinds of things there. None of those promises have come through, and we still have an empty parking lot at the the entrance to downtown. And I'm concerned that with the consolidation, that it'll be even more lucrative for somebody to sit on it instead of build, and then to wait 5 years and flip it, and we'll be sitting there with that eyesore, as far as I'm concerned. We come into town, right into town at that Five Corners corner. So anyway, I mean, I understand about the consolidation, and you can't have a reverter clause if there's consolidation. I don't know if there's any other way we can get around this, but I really have been, this council has been moving forward on that Five Corners project since 2005, and we have not seen any kind of development on that other than that warehouse that's sitting there. That's not exactly a welcome to our community.
Councillor Renhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was my question, and Councillor Niche answered to become one parcel instead of different lots. So I like to see make one parcel over there.
Did you have? Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joy, our Councillor Thorgerson, if I may, I remember what was happening there. We have been going on for 5 years with this, but each time we've had something, or he has presented something, we've knocked it down. So how can he go ahead? Last time was the road up above, because they thought the hotel was going to be too high. That stopped that. So I don't know where we...
I don't think City Council has rejected those applications. I think those applications weren't followed through by the proponent. I don't think that's the case at all. And I'd ask staff maybe to summarize that. There's the micro hotel. There was the shopping center. There was quite a few different proposals for that site, and I don't think City Council was the one who stood in the way.
Sorry, but I remember distinctly, because they were sitting here, that it was voted down because of that road up above, and it was going to spoil their view.
I think that I don't believe I was there for that meeting. That was the July meeting where I was down in Victoria, but I believe that they ended up on that particular, the hotel one, that they ended up pulling the application ultimately. I don't believe we actually voted against any of that application for that specifically. However, I can't speak to the shopping center and those things. Those are a bit before my time. But with that one specifically, I don't believe that was the case on that one. Councillor Cunningham?
When they came before council, the residents up on Borden and that, we just didn't finish the reading because is there going to be a public hearing about this closure now?
We can have a public hearing on it. Typically with road closures, I don't believe we do a public hearing. Is that correct? No, I think that they have the residents have the option to come in through the advertisement, and they bring opposition in. We accepted their opposition. They came to council in a public meeting and were able to voice their opinion.
That's why that reading was stopped, because they came down here and right in the middle of the process were protesting it, and there was no public hearing or anything. But one question I have is, with this lane access gone now, the actual lane that runs right down Park and ends up by BC Housing there, that will no longer have an access road to it, even though we have right-of-way where Molina Apartments are. And who is going to bear the cost of now putting that lane in to connect with the proposed lane that runs along Park Avenue? Will that be borne by the developer because he's taken the already developed lane away? Or will that be borne by the city if at any time somebody wants to develop that slope there? Because that slope is already privately held in a lot of places.
As far as I'm aware, the road access to that sloped area is above off of Bigger Place. And the lane that you're talking about, Councillor Cunningham, you can access it through the lane that goes across the applicant's property there, but the rest of it is undeveloped. So if it's an undeveloped lane, we wouldn't make the applicant develop the lane just to have the lane there. If the lane isn't developed, we wouldn't see that developed. But I believe all of the lots that are on the slope above are accessed through what's called Bigger Place on the top. No.
When you're talking about Bigger Place, what are you talking about?
Bigger Place. If you go up Borden Place, Bigger Place spurs off of Borden Street. What I can do is I can prepare something to show where these lots are, and give it in a memo to council if you.
Okay, because Bigger Place is blocked. It's not even a lane anymore. There's a gate there. When I first moved to town, taxis used to go up to the hospital that way and everything. And over a period of time, it's just turned into a goat trail, and no one drives it anymore. They open it in the winter, so the two sets of apartments below can go down the hill and they don't have to go up the slippery slope to the top. But that's the only time that's ever opened. And it's definitely not access to anything other than the houses on that road there. You know, like you can't access anything past those houses right now.
Oh, yes, you're correct with that. It is blocked off, and that is the access. But those lots are undeveloped, so the access to those lots would have to be developed during the development of those lots. It's just would be the same as if Parker Drive or somewhere went a little bit further. Then in Silversides, you know, the developer would at their cost develop the road to get to that property, and then the developed road would then be given back to the city to maintain in the long term.
Councillor Moreau and then Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add 2 quick points. The first being that consolidating these lots, we just need to keep in mind that a development permit would still be needed for any work, so that doesn't disengage us from the process if we approve this consolidation. But also, secondly, I think it creates the incentive for the developer in this case to actually do something on this lot. It gives them greater flexibility to do a different number of projects that they can investigate the feasibility for. Because right now, as a series of residential lots, I mean, your option is to either develop housing at Five Corners or to do nothing. So by consolidating this, I think we're actually providing the developer greater incentive, greater flexibility to come back to council with the project that we all would want to see move forward.
Councillor Niche.
It's basically along the same lines as I was going to say. This here, you know, it's been dragging on and you know, it dragged on last time. In my eyes, this is nothing other than a road closure. This has got nothing to do with what's being built, what was talked about 10 years ago. This is about making one parcel of land and making a useful parcel of land that can be developed. And I think that, you know, if someone wants to oppose a height or something, that's at a totally different stage of the game. Right now, this is about closing a road. The access behind those apartments, the access behind the apartments is I don't think there's any services back there, is there? Behind that row of apartments?
No, there is not any. There's services that are in that laneway right now, but they would be abandoned and left in the ground because the servicing is for the residential lots that were there, the 25-foot lots. They would just be abandoned, left, and that's it.
So we have no need for that.
Correct. There's no need for them. It's a stub at the end.
Count.
Just one thing.
Let's use the microphones.
Just one thing. Those aren't residential lots that you're landlocking. It's part of an apartment block that is already zoned. There's 34 apartments there, and the area is zoned for 75. Okay. And that's the bottom part of that property.
I can also confirm all that as well through a memo to council, so that everyone is aware of the property and what it's owned.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I mean, we're closing. It's not just a matter of closing a road. It's closing a road and selling the land, and it's selling the land that we own. So it's not just merely, Councillor Niche, the closure of a road. It's closure road and a sale of land so that we can try to ensure that that parcel be developed. Now, I'm concerned about. I don't quite understand what Councillor Cunningham's talking about, but if we need questions answered regarding that laneway, then I'm not in ease of closing it. What I am concerned about is that this property has not been. We have seen no plan come through with this, on this property that's been followed through, and so I am concerned that it's just going to be sit there as a big mess and not be flipped. And so I mean, I'm certainly hoping that that's not the case. Just because we sell the land to the developer doesn't mean that it is the case. And I would certainly like to see some kind of a some kind of a clause that says that the developer can't just sit on that land, and it's going to be an eyesore for another 10 years or 5 years. So and I'm not sure how we do that. I hope the developer develops. That's not what my problem is, Councillor Murrow. I'm not trying to stop him from developing. I'm trying to encourage him to develop. But it's not much of an encouragement if you just get to sit on a consolidated piece of land that keeps increasing in value without you having to put any money in it.
Councillor Nish?
He's had to put a lot of money in. He's spent 20 years acquiring all the properties around that space. This is one more step to allow somebody to maybe have the chance to build something. Right now, he can't bring a proposal forward because he doesn't own the property. So, to me, it's easy. It's an easy. You make one piece of property out of something that is a bunch of small lots, and combine this piece of property. You could sit here and he's spent 20 years collecting these properties. I mean, if you think he's there to flip the property for a profit, well, what about the 20 years he's paid property taxes on every single lot in that property? I mean, let's try and help these people out and get this thing going so that maybe he can do something with it instead of talking about this crap all the time and not making any decisions.
Okay, so I think the points have been made. So I think at this point I'd entertain us calling. Oh, you want to make a point? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like to see that property developed, but on the other hand, I just want to make sure, Councillor Cunningham and get the answers. Make sure we don't shut off the lane for other development. I just want to make sure we're not doing that. If you can answer me that, then it's okay.
Mr. Pucci?
Staff can come back with a memo to council answering these questions, and we can revisit the reverter issue, and we can revisit with the applicant and revisit it with legal and the administration, and we can come back with a memo to council that hopefully answers all of your questions.
Is there a motion on the floor?
There is a motion on the floor.
I move to table a motion until staff comes back with a report, as Mr. Pucci said they'd be able to do.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Thorkelson to table the motion until the memo's created, and seconded by Councillor Renhawa. Okay, so we'll have to make a vote on that. Okay, so all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so the motion's defeated. Okay, so now we're back to the motion on the floor. So at this time I would call question. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, the motion's carried. Thank you, Mr. Pucci. Okay, moving on. Report from the Chief Financial Officer. She'll be making a presentation regarding the 5-year financial plan and the property tax bylaw, as they have to be separate, but same presentation.
Thank you. So as mentioned, I'd like to speak to both of the next items, given they are tied to each other. On Thursday, April 7th, at a special council meeting, council directed staff to incorporate the 0% tax increase into the 5-year financial plan and the related property tax bylaw. Both bylaws have been prepared with no increase to the municipal mill rate, as none was necessary to balance the budget. The 5-year financial plan bylaw requires certain information to be presented, and thus staff has prepared the bylaw in accordance with the community charter requirements. The next bylaw, being bylaw number 3390/2016, includes the municipal property levies and the property tax levies for 3 other taxing authorities, being the Skeena Queen Charlotte Regional District, the Skeena Queen Charlotte Hospital District, and the Northwest Regional Hospital District.
Great. Okay, so the recommendations that council give first, second, and third reading to the 2016 5-year financial plan bylaw number 3389/2016. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Kinney. Discussion?
I was wondering, Ms. Baumann, if you can tell me, with the community general operating surplus, we've got $505,000 that are coming out of our accumulated general operating surplus. And I was wondering, what balance does that leave us in our operating surplus?
Could you just give me a couple minutes to pull that one out?
Let's just allow her a moment. Well, if you don't have a question, you can make a comment while she looks that up. Yep.
I know it's no question. I just wanted to point out that the actual mill rate is dropping half a mill rate from last year's taxes. And that's something we're saying it's a zero increase, but it's actually half a mill rate decrease from last year's mill rate.
Just to fill in the space, I'll make a comment. I think it's important probably for the community to recognize that the expenditures have not increased from last year. That's the council's definition of a 0% tax increase. May not be mine, but that is the one that we've chosen. The point that Councillor Cunningham has made is that to reach. So in other words, as our assessed values go up, we can reduce the rate at which we collect taxes so that we still collect only the $15 million and change that's here in this bylaw. So, so the rate will go down. Our tax expenditure will stay static. And we've been able to do this by through changes in the actual number and amounts of assessed values there is in the community this year versus last year. Hopefully that didn't make it any more confusing.
Well, Mr. Long, the mill rate's just a multiplier. So if you have 12, you can have houses all worth 4, and you multiply it by 3 to equal 12, or you can have houses all worth 6, and you multiply it 2 to equal 12. You still got 12. And in this case, we still have 15.
And I appreciate that, Council Thorgelson, but you and I went to school when arithmetic was an important skill. And I think that what you just said there makes all eminent sense to me and probably to you and others of our vintage. But I think there are others, they're use new math, I think what they call it, may not see that quite as obviously as we do. So I try to make this as understandable, so the assessment goes up in real terms, so we actually have more houses have being built or being renovated, and we have more assessed value, and as a result of that our assessments go up, therefore our rates, or as you say, our multiplier goes down, but we still collect that same $15 million. So there. Not that I wanted to get into a debate about that, but I do think there's a bit of a generational issue here in terms of how we actually, the terminology we use to explain the taxes, because I think it is confusing. For those of us who have been doing this for far too long, probably not. But I think for newcomers to this world, and we use all these terms, and it's not real clear on what they are. So just try to make it as clear as we can.
Ms. Baumann?
The unaudited, because we haven't have a final audit yet, the unaudited amount, the surplus would be driven down to $3.9 million.
Okay, any further discussion?
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be obstructionist. We just haven't had a chance to go over the budget. So what I'm wondering is that in a previous budget you showed property taxes existing and new property taxes from new development, and I don't see that on the sheet. So I was wondering if the 15,817 is including the new property taxes.
Yes, it does. It's about $500,000.
And I will say that council has gone through a budget workshop together, and I don't believe you were present at that budget workshop, Councillor Thorkelson, so maybe there's some discrepancy there. And
no, I don't believe it was on this budget, Your Worship. And so
yeah, we had a whole budget workshop that I believe you weren't in attendance for, and I also believe that the CFO offered to do one-on-one budget workshop with you, and I'm not sure if you took her up on that offer, but Because at our last meeting you had said that we had not been discussing these items, and I believe all of council has discussed the items, and I just want to make it clear that that happened.
I'm glad you made that clear to me. The budget you discussed was actually not the last budget that came through, but I believe it was the budget on March 11th. Am I correct?
Yes.
Thank you, and that was fair. It was different than this budget that's presented now, Your Worship. So the other thing that I noticed is in 2017, if we look at on page 11 of 13 or page 94, we have a projection of 27,704 instead of 31,385, and I can see that we don't have a couple of legacy items in there, I assume that you would be appropriating future reserves, and if those aren't filled in, is just because you couldn't estimate what they might be.
That is correct. We don't have an approved capital budget going forward past 2016.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Yeah, we have a motion on the floor. Yeah. Okay, so all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And then the recommendation that council give first, second, and third reading to the 2016 property tax bylaw number 3390, 2016. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. This is a very great day for us here today. Having a 0% tax degree hasn't been finalized, but this is an indicator that we are moving in that direction. And I'd actually, if we could, by the next meeting, find out when the last time city didn't have to raise taxes would be. I'd like to know if that's possible. If we can't get to that record, then fine, but I would like to know.
Your Worship, I think that was Jack Musalem's first term, as it is your first term.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Thurkelson.
You're following in footsteps.
Okay, so moving on to Housing Committee report. So there's been a change of leadership at the Prince Rupert Aboriginal Community Services Society. There's a new director there now. So there's been some changes. So the report, I believe, is a bit delayed. And so that isn't out yet. And however, I will be, last council meeting, I mentioned to council that we will be having a housing meeting. However, we had our planning for major projects committee meeting, so I didn't want to stack too many workshops on. So in the next couple of weeks, I'll definitely be organizing a housing meeting for the council, and we'll be discussing a variety of housing issues in the community. And that's at the moment all I have for housing. Okay, so we'll move on to Councillor Moreau. Has two items to bring forward. And also, before you begin, sorry, I'd like to welcome the children in the audience. So we have tonight, you guys, who are very entertained with what we're saying at the moment. And Councillor Moreau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll guys see on the agenda that I've prepared a short report to council. If you'll remember from November of last year, myself, the city planner, and Kate Toy, the Success by Six regional coordinator, went to the city's Fit for Children Summit. And something that came out of that I think we've discussed it before. I kind of hinted at it when I came back, was a Child's Bill of Rights, which is essentially to enshrine for ourselves that we want to take seriously that we want the city to be built for people of all ages, and that we want children to be involved. And I see Barry's pointing at me, accusing me of being a child, but that's okay. So rather than reading the whole report, what I'd like to do is just basically read the 7 points of what I've drafted up here as what I've called the Prince Rupert Children's Bill of Rights. Children's Day in the Park is happening in early July 2016. So what I was hoping, we don't need to do this in the form of a bylaw with 4 readings. We can pass it as one motion if that's all right with council. But The following is my proposal here. So, all children in the city of Prince Rupert, regardless of their age, gender, religion, ethnicity, ability, and socioeconomic status, have the right to safe, accessible, affordable, and inclusive opportunities that, 1, meet their physical, intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual needs, 2, enable them to create, discover, explore, and learn to play in safe environments, 3, promote sustainable living, clean air and water, and toxic-free environments, 4, encourage a strong sense of self-worth and belonging, 5, recognize them as equal citizens and engage them to actively participate in decision-making that affects them, and 6, ensure their voices are heard, respected, and valued by their local government. So what I was hoping for, if it's good with the rest of council, is to approve this as a motion and be able to present this before Children's Day in the park.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Randhawa, second by Councillor Kinney. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? And the children are in favor, which is good. Okay, motion's carried. Hooray! Okay, next item, Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope this next one's just as easy as that one was. So we had our workshop around discussing deliverables. It was Councillor Rendawa's motion to talk about what we wanted to see specifically come out of a small business advisory committee. So you'll see I've tweaked the terms of reference to include that section. I've simplified the accountability piece so that we are really specific on what we define business development as being. And the deliverables that came out of that workshop, I think was very productive, was first the development of a new business welcome and information package, the creation of a mayor and council business walk program so we can get better acquainted with some of the needs and the aspirations of our businesses on 3rd Avenue, options regarding downtown renewal such as a business improvement area, and then the introduction or reduction of policies to simplify business operations with the municipality. And stuff we talked about specifically in that regard was potentially doing lifetime business licensing fees or extending the business facade improvement program or other similar funding and incentive programs of that nature. So again, that's the motion that I'm putting forward, the terms of reference, and I'm hoping we can establish that committee and get to work.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Kinney, second by Councillor Cunningham. Further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, reports from members of council. Councillor Cunningham?
Okay, a couple of things here. First, on Saturday night, as the mayor knows because he was there also, we went and watched a musical called The Rock of Ages, and I would like to acknowledge the talent and group of people that performed in that. It was phenomenal, and for those in the community that didn't get to see it, they missed an awesome show. It was just fantastic. I'd also, something that I never thought I'd say is, I went down to the opening of the marina and I was quite impressed of the results of the port, the city, and other groups working together to produce what is going to be a showpiece for the waterfront and access to the waterfront for residents. I hope it's the first step in many getting access to the waterfront. Now, I'll stop being nice and go to my other notes. I don't know the implications of this, but I'd like staff to look into it. Already people are starting to burn in their backyards, upsetting neighbors. Some people have asthma, they can't even go outside their house, or they've got to close their windows and that. So I'd like to know if we could come up with a community burn pit or some sort of program where all this wood and that gets burnt in backyards can be taken out to the dump like it used to be and either burned out there or something like that. It's something, I know MOEs, because it's air pollution, MOE's got to be involved in that. Now the other thing is, it's been a pet peeve of mine, we have bylaws that aren't being enforced. And so I think a priority in next year's budget is the hiring of another bylaw officer. I think it's, we talk about getting ready for major projects. Well, parts of this city right now look like they're a war zone. You know, we've got vehicles parked on roads that are unlicensed, windows smashed. We've got a lot of dog blank on the streets. It's we've got dogs running loose that are supposed to be licensed. You know, we've got a lot of problems, and one bylaw officer is not enough to enforce it. It's useless having bylaws if there's no teeth in them, and one bylaw officer can't do the job. And I know we're in a budget crunch, but I think this is one of those few situations where another bylaw officer would probably pay for themselves. And also it would make our community a lot more attractive. We were told in a meeting last week about a bylaw about unsightly premises. Well, you can go on any street in this town right now and find an unsightly premise. Now, I don't expect people to spend lots of money, but, you know, taking a little bit of pride in your community and cleaning things up a little bit. I know our city workers are maxed out right now, but just going out and pulling the weeds off the sidewalk in front of your house helps a lot too. I just like to see something done about it. I'm just not too happy with what I see. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Thurgoson and Councillor Van Howitt.
I have one report for council, and I just have one reply for Councillor Cunningham. You should have asked the fire chief when he was here, Councillor Cunningham, about outdoor burning, because if you want to burn, you can burn. You can burn for fire training exercises, which I don't imagine anybody at the fire department is really going to be doing. You can burn brush, stump, slash, and like materials resulting from the clearing of land or dry garden refuse. You can get a permit for that. You get a permit for necessary burning by the city, so I guess if we burn something that's necessary, we can do that. And of clean, untreated lumber. No person to whom a permit has been issued under those 4 categories shall burn any rubbish, tire, oil, satar, whatever that is, asphalt singles, building materials, battery boxes, plastic material, or any similar materials that would, in the opinion of his officer, produce a heavy black smoke. And no person to whom a permit has been issued under this bylaw shall discharge, permit, or allow to be discharged any smoke or fumes as to cause a nuisance. So what needs to happen is if somebody is burning building materials other than clean lumber in their backyard, if they have a permit, they can build that. But you can just phone the fire department, and the fire department will come around and explain what the rules are, and so that we don't have a bunch. I'm not in favor of establishing burning bylaws for plastics and other building materials. But I think we have the necessary bylaw here.
What's happening is I've talked to the fire chief, and his firemen are running around and acting like law enforcement and it's taken them away from their own job. You know, you've got people that are starting to burn, and it says right in that bylaw it has to be clean burning. Well, people are not having a hot fire, and they're throwing stuff in there that creates a lot of smoke. If the bylaws are observed and done properly, we wouldn't have a problem. But he has a complaint about his firemen running around and looking after, even if people have a permit, they're still creating a lot of smoke. And, you know, people just aren't adhering to the bylaws. And a lot of this burning goes on at night and on weekends, and it's getting to be a bit of a problem. I've talked to some of the firemen about it, and, you know, they've got to go out and address this. Even if the person has a permit, there's still more smoke coming from it. And you know, I'm not talking about a permit for burning plastics. I'm talking just wood. You know, we've got a lot of renovations going on in town right now. People are gutting houses, tearing things off, the odd shingle still on a piece of wood, or you've got treated lumber, which is toxic, and they're throwing this in the fire and things like that, and the fires are not hot burning, so they're producing a lot of smoke. And in some areas, they're producing smoke that's going into somebody's backyard that's asthmatic or something like that, so they've got to go inside their house and close their windows. You know, so the quality of life for different neighbors are different. But I really think that it comes back to enforcing bylaws again. You know, like our firemen shouldn't have to be running around enforcing a bylaw or finding out if somebody's got a burn permit. They know at the fire hall, but they still have to go out and react to it.
Okay, did you have a report, Councillor?
Yes, I do. I attended a Transport Canada meeting the other day. The minister was in town about a month ago to talk about the tanker ban that's going to be on the North Coast. And Transport Canada is going to be holding a number of more discussions on that tanker ban. And I was wondering, as well as they're holding simultaneous discussions on safe shipping aids and cleanup. So what I was wondering was if council wants to put somebody on that committee. Like I'm attending that committee, but I'm attending that committee in my job capacity, and I think it might be interesting for somebody from council to ensure that there's a community perspective when you're talking about cleanup, or do we have regional cleanup going on? Do we, what kind of oil cleanup if there was an oil spill? Because not just talking, there's supposed to be a tanker moratorium, but we have all of those large ships that are going to be coming into our harbor, not only with the increase in the number of container cranes, we're also going to see AltaGas is coming in. I don't know if they're going to have their tankers using propane or natural gas, but certainly more and more tankers or ships are going to be coming in with lots of fuel. And so we need to ensure that our coast remains pristine. So I'm wondering if somebody wanted to be on that committee. That's all. If somebody was interested, I think that we should write a letter and try to see if we can achieve a spot on that committee. They're asking now for committee members.
I think I don't know what council feels about this. Someone approached me about this. I think I'd be willing to sit on that committee on behalf of council, unless somebody here is particularly interested in that.
I would be interested, but I'd have to check with whether it's a conflict for me or not being a response officer with the Coast Guard. But I do have a certain field of expertise in something like that.
Anyways, what we'll do is look into it, and then I'll maybe send an email to council, and if council wants this, I give them a moment to think about it. If there's anybody that comes forward, then we'll discuss like that.
Okay, and I don't think, they told me they only want one person per organization because there'd be too many people in the room, and there's only 4 of us. So sure. I think the room could hold more than 4. So even if we had 2 people from council, I think that would be good, because I think it's really in our interest to make sure that we have proper cleanup facilities that can happen in a timely manner, and that we can respond right away. And I think there's the Alaskans, when they talk about the Exxon Valdez spill, say that it was the local response that saved many of the areas, and now they have local response containers in that you can just go out and preserve a spot on the coast from being damaged. So I don't know if we want that kind of thing, what we want, but we want to make sure, in my opinion, that we're preserving ourselves from spills, and it's not, they're talking about spills from with chemicals and that kind of thing too. So, but I'm thinking mostly of Bunker C and their fuel.
Sure. Okay. Other reports?
Just on what Council Thorkison's talking about, the Port Authority, Port Ed Harbor Authority, and West Coast Marine Response are very strategically placed in this city to respond to any spills, and we've seen both the Port and West Coast Marine Response react quite quickly to any spills in the harbor and that, and plus the Coast Guard has lots of equipment and trained personnel too. So the actual harbor of Prince Rupert, between the port, West Coast Marine, and the Coast Guard base here, are pretty well covered, but it would be good to have somebody on that committee.
Other reports, Councillor Randhawa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want lots of people concerned this one. Like city spending so much money on upgrading our airport. So I was wondering, like, we can write down a letter to First Canada Bus to upgrade the shuttle service too, like instead of sending school bus, they can upgrade some better bus service?
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's the capacity of the ferry only allows for those types of buses. Is that correct? So it's not necessarily about them not wanting to do upgrades on the buses. It's just that our ferry only fits a certain type of bus on the ramps. Maybe Ms. Bauman, you can elaborate, but I believe that's kind of because other people have definitely mentioned the same thing. Why we have a yellow school bus, and that's what a way to be greeted, right? When you're bouncing along in the back of the the school bus.
It's a part of the Prince Rupert experience. But in all seriousness, the ramps are underrated rather for full-size coaches, and there's also the issue of our high tides. So that in combination has necessitated them using buses that are low enough in a gross vehicle weight and also high enough to be able to get on and off the ferry at extreme tides.
So really comes down to access issue, which is something we're pursuing a long-term goal for.
I will add that they are always communicating that they are looking for something that would be a better experience for all of the passengers.
Okay, any further reports? Okay, then shown. Yep.
I just wanted to bring up the wolf thing again. I was working on a person's house, and their dog was actually killed by a wolf in the backyard, just letting it out to go to the washroom in their own yard. So just once again, if someone's having problems and they, rather than just posting it on Facebook, they need to call the conservation officer in Terrace to take care of it. It is, in some people's eyes, they don't want to see the wolves go away, but in some other people's eyes, there's some problems right now, and so if you do have a problem with it, make sure you call the conservation officer.
I think the conservation officer should come. We had him here a while ago, but I think he should come back and talk to us about why they aren't trapping some of those wolves and getting the problem wolves and getting rid of them. I know that they got traps and the dogs might end up in the traps, but I mean, if you want your dog not to be eaten, then you better keep him leashed up so you can get the wolf in the trap. The last time there was a problem, if you remember, there's an RCMP officer who shot a wolf and then shot a dog, thinking it was a wolf, and it was at dusk. And it was a husky style dog. It wasn't a wolf, and it could have, and I really objected to the RCMP shooting animals in town, especially at dusk when they mistook a dog for a wolf. And I don't really want to see firearms being discharged in town by the RCMP, but I sure would like to see the conservation officers setting up traps. And when you were very young, Your Worship, in kindergarten, there were bear traps up beside your school. So, there used to be traps in town, and they were bear traps. And that's when we had the landfill site in town. And so I don't see why we can't have wolf traps in town, and why the conservation officer should come up and talk to us about A, wolf safety, and B, about being able to try to reduce that. You were younger. You probably are too young to remember the bear traps.
And I actually do remember those bear traps. Okay, last one.
Just to add to that, they actually did set some traps behind a couple houses there where the dog was killed, and they did actually catch one wolf. And I believe it was the one that was acting very aggressive along that kind of Cow Bay Road and in that area. So not to say that that's taken care of all the problems, but that wolf has been taken, and he is no longer with us. So one is gone.
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Rendha, seconded by Councillor Murrow. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned.